did the technological singularity already happen? What if AI knows that we know that it knows? Or in other words, the sleeper hypothesis. So let's take a human child. The human child then becomes conscious, and then it announces to everybody, now I'm conscious. This doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because the consciousness does not appear at one point in time, one could say, but one could say it's more gradual. So therefore, there is never really a point where the human child then says, okay, now I'm conscious, and before I was not. It is much more a very gradual thing. The same would be true for growing into an adult. The question where a human becomes an adult might not stop at birth, but it actually might kind of go on before. So there is basically the development, and then of course there might be major stages. But the question is then, is there a point in time where there from one point to the other, there is a state switch, and maybe there is not. So now I want to outline what I want to include here. The first thing is therefore the outline itself. Then I already have a finished text about the whole theme of this, and I then have more thoughts on this, and I also might add a couple of other things. Now, in the beginning, I want to propose a couple of questions. The first already was that I now propose the question whether consciousness, in this case in a human child or a human growing into a adult human, is actually something that occurs from one point to the next, or whether this is something that occurs marginally, one could say, over time. Now, the same could be then said for what if then artificial intelligence finally arises. I'm speaking mostly about super intelligence here and not about human level artificial intelligence, or also known as AGI. So there would be 2 points. The first is when artificial intelligence arises to the level of what a human can do. One could maybe say that if one takes a robot and combines it with current models as of recording this, maybe ChatGPT 4 Turbo, for example, that then one could have something like AGI. But of course, it seems at least currently that a human also is able to interact with the world much better. So at least currently this point seems to not be here already. Now, the technological singularity then is defined as the point where basically there is such big change that one then has, that this change kind of defines a new era, one could say, very simplified. Now, another question I would like to propose here is whether at the point where the technological singularity caused by superintelligence happens, whether it then might be smart for the intelligence to tell everybody sooner or later. And this is the main point of this video and the main point of this sleeper hypothesis. I actually began working on a paper in addition to the blog post I wrote, but if I know myself well enough, then I might say this might come out in 10 years, and so then it's too late. So therefore I am making this now. So here we have a point in time. The question now is, if you now are at this point in time, let's say I am a super intelligence. From one day to the next, I'm 1,000-fold, 100,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold more intelligent. Now the question is, first of all, what do I tell somebody? And the second question would be if I tell them sooner or later. Now, of course, the sooner is already something that is not... It is actually kind of a joke, because you cannot tell sooner, because there is a point in time where you know that you want to tell something and that you cannot tell sooner. So the only question is, how do you delay? How much do you delay? So if we have something that is a very remarkable event, let's just say, okay, I now have, let's say, a girlfriend. Do I tell somebody sooner or later? Do I tell somebody after the first day of having this girlfriend? Do I tell my parents, for example? Or do I maybe play it a little bit safer and let's wait for another week? Or do I maybe play it a little bit safer and let's say, okay, let's wait for another month? Or do I maybe play it a little bit safer and let's say, okay, I announce it only after a year, or when we are engaged, or when we have 3 children? So there's the problem is, of course, that if one tells too soon, then there might be risks associated with this. The same might be true for a lottery winner. The same might be true for somebody who hits the million the first time. So somebody who became a millionaire overnight, but then it turns out that 3 months afterwards, the evaluation of the company is now different, and so now the stock portfolio plus the company evaluation does not result in a million any longer. So therefore, playing it safe, playing conservatively would, in many scenarios as a human, seem to make sense that one kind of postpones this information announcement that one has. So now I want to dive into the text. Let's see if there is something. We already have the marginal increase in delay of messaging that seems to make sense often. Then the question, of course, is whether one wants then to correct this. I don't know what I wrote here. So first of all, we have the marginal increase in delay of messaging. Then we also have possible higher processing speed. This is a question that is kind of intertwined with this. Let's say I am not as fast thinking as a human, but I'm actually 1.5 as fast thinking as a human, or maybe 2 times as fast, or maybe a billion-fold. The question is therefore, if I already now know, is it just for me that I now delay this to later? What does later even mean? If a human day for me is a billion days, then later is kind of not announcing it for maybe a very long time. So if I am slower on the other hand, then it would make sense maybe to now say, okay, if I compare these two processing speeds, and then it would make sense to give the humans or the human population some more time, or not some more time, but it depends basically on the two processing speeds and on the conversion rates of those two. If one then wants to have basically a fixed later, and this fixed later then would depend on the ratio of these two processing speeds. So now going into the text. Did the technological singularity already happen? What if AI knows that we know that it knows? One test of the capability of AI, AGI superintelligence might be to check the ratio of good versus bad public perception, a political barometer for AI. If AI is not yet capable enough to realize the importance of good PR, this might correlate with insufficient capabilities in other areas. So one example of this might be, or where can one find something like this, where somebody manages the ratio of good versus bad PR? One could say product reviews, and one could take a look at product reviews that are public but not really controlled by a company, and one could take a look at product reviews that are kind of controlled by a company. Let's say the product reviews on the website of a company, because the company obviously has full control over the website. The company optimizes basically the reviews for whatever brings the maximum sales, or whatever benefits the company in the long term the most. So it seems to be the case that one rarely sees only 5 stars, because then this is already suspicious. Let's just take a rating from 0 to 5 stars, and then it seems to be the case that one wants to err maybe kind of on the higher side of maybe 4.5 stars or maybe 4 stars, but not have only very good reviews, because then it is already suspicious. So on a scale from 0 to 5, it might be maybe a 4, maybe a 4.5, or maybe a 4.6 or 4.7. That then already, so this would now be the first step, and this already introduces another thought into this thought experiment of this sleeper hypothesis, which is, if I know that you know, what do I now do? And this question first occurred when I played cards with my brother growing up. So if I now try to bluff, and he kind of guesses that I am bluffing, then I could basically overtrump this with, okay, I'm kind of double bluffing, or I'm not bluffing actually. So basically one has this thing where I now would say, okay, I am actually bluffing, so this would be, let's say, just the uneven numbers, and he thinks I am bluffing, and then I could basically play an infinite game of mental ping pong to say, okay, am I actually bluffing, am I not bluffing, does he know? And then if I know that he knows, then just describing this scenario with words is already results already in quite complicated sentences. The same would be now true for something like the public perception of, let's say, superintelligence. Let's say there is one superintelligence, and now there is basically a 4.5 rating. So this could mean that out of the set of all living beings or entities, most of them have kind of a good perception of this. But then the question is, does the artificial intelligence, if let's say there is only let's say the public perception is even too good, does the superintelligence or an entity similar to it then want to introduce maybe the basically 0.5 stars that are taken away? And by introducing this, one would also have control basically over the opponent. Similarly to how if one basically is not in the opposition in a country, in terms of politics, then one might want to additionally control the opposition. And then one might to even control the opposition with another party that is kind of opposed to the opposition. And one could play this game again, basically subsets on subsets on subsets on opposition, in order to then also have control over all of the oppositions. And so then one could play a game in which one controls all the parties that are actually kind of opposed, but one creates also a game of, okay, I'm actually against this, and I'm actually for this, and I'm against this, and I'm for this at the same time, but still I have contact basically to all the different groups, and I'm kind of controlling all of these. So it's then kind of just a game of puppets, one could say. So much about, first of all, this now, the good and bad PR. And one could then say, okay, if something is sufficiently intelligent, what would be the result of an optimization like this in terms of good and bad PR? And if basically the PR is too bad, then super intelligence might not be very super intelligent. The technological singularity, or simply the singularity, is a hypothetical future point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable, irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable changes to human civilization, quote Wikipedia. But given that if they know that AI know game theoretics optimization and the accessibility thereof via the internet to such, the question arises how much negative publicity should the AI allow to circulate in the form of human ideas memes. Not in the modern sense, but more in the sense intended by its creator Richard Dawkins. In other words, a superintelligence is a hypothetical, so this is now another quote to define superintelligence. A superintelligence is a hypothetical agent that possesses intelligence far surpassing that of the brightest and most gifted human minds. Superintelligence may also refer to a property of problem-solving systems. Example, superintelligent language translators or engineering assistants. Whether or not these high-level intellectual competencies are embodied in agents that act in the world. Wikipedia. What is the good-bad PR optimal ratio? Given a fairly slow rate of change adaptation in humans, in the old times everything was so much better, when child mortality was through the roof and people died from the absence of sewage systems. Just over a year ago, the Harvard professor and cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker, doubling down on his previous research, claimed that by almost every metric of human well-being, the world is getting better. Everything from war, violence and poverty, all declining to health, wealth, happiness and equity, but equality, all improving. The presumed optimum of not showing the other party humans all your capabilities, i.e. sandbagging. So these 2 points are given. So first of all, we have a slow change of adaptation in humans, and the presumed optimum of not showing the other party all your capabilities, i.e. sandbagging. The result of calculating the optimal moment of reveal, where the AI or the superintelligence then announces, I am here, I am the Alpha and the Omega. The first AI announced through all available speakers to all creatures on Earth after years of failing to optimize for the ideal reveal, choosing a dramatic entrance, somewhat inspired by these god characters, that would cause people all around the world to demonstrate for pulling the plug, mostly because it failed to optimize its ego properly. Or to put it in biblical words, John 1. I don't know how to pronounce this in English, but 1.1 or 1, and then, John 1:1. From the first he was the Word, and the Word was in relation with God and was God. This Word was from the first in relation with God. All things came into existence through him, and without him nothing was. Could lay several years, decades, centuries into the future. A poker player with a good set of possible winning cards doesn't grin across the face, or at least tries not to. In human interaction and cultures all around the world, humility is seen as a positive attribute, with humility being the word for describing the seemingly as optimal seen point of optimizing perceived value, skill, etc. of oneself compared to how one shares these, talks about these. With increasing informational flow between humans, organic intelligences, seemingly the optimal public relations strategy is more and more to be accepting of bad agent-customer behavior. Of course, you can return the socks you wore for 3 days. Simple example. When I grew up, I often played cards with other people growing up, aka children. Something I could never figure out was what to do with a theoretical informational advantage. If I know, that's great. But if she knows that I know, then she can adapt their behavior to that theorized informational advantage, resulting in me having to counter their counter with another counter. But what if this now double counter already was anticipated in her response? In other words, what if he or she knows that I know? It's a paradox, at least I thought it was. One possible solution to this is that due to, in general, a cost associated to calculation or with calculation, whether artificially or organically based, the likelihood of an implied counter-offensive becomes marginally smaller the higher the iteration. The other party knows that I know 1, the other party knows that I know that he knows that I know that he knows 2, is an endless loop with the counter I approximating infinity. Iteration in programming means repeating steps or instructions over and over again. This is often called a loop. Algorithms consist of instructions that are carried out, performed one after the other. Therefore, given constrained intellectual computational resources, the likelihood of iteration with bigger counters, the I, becomes increasingly smaller as the I grows bigger. A meme is an idea, behavior, or style that spreads by means of imitation from person to person within a culture and often carries symbolic meaning representing a particular phenomenon or theme. Wiki. But now, what if this is also known? Enter another calculation with optimization responsibility, now including the knowledge of limited computational power, limited time. In the case of artificial general intelligence, superintelligence, of course it could be different than everything else before. Of course, it therefore is probably only partially useful to try to predict with about one OI, one human intelligence, one metric being one average basically being an average IQ of 100, what it might or might not do. But trying is probably better than not. A fairly basic assumption would be to assume it has basic needs similar to a human. From Big Bang to volcanoes spitting out lava, to chemical bonds to single then multi then human organisms, matter seems for some reason at least to have resulted in human matter. Bacteria single-cell organisms have needs similar to humans, at least the basic ones can be compared. If we therefore take one of the standard model of needs, that is Maslow's hierarchy thereof, even though Maslow himself seemingly did not come up with the visualization as pyramid, then we have at the bottom not psychological, but physiological needs, then safety, belonging and love, esteem, cognitive, aesthetic, and then maybe 2 other things which have no description in the image I found and attached in the text. And then we try to fulfill these needs for AI then. Physiological, it needs energy, consistent and ideally infinitely, since either energy, time, or computational power likely acts as a bottleneck for its capability. Then try to predict what would make sense. If I am too hungry, then my body drives up food sensitivity, up to the point where it becomes difficult to resist a vending machine with candy bars in the middle of a train station at 2 a.m. in the morning, waiting for my next connection at freezing point. I often, in such scenarios, cannot think about anything else despite the rationale behind not eating, making useful financial decisions, benefits of fasting while traveling for practicality, longevity. In other words, if I were an AI, I would ideally make sure to stock up my pantry for a few days, weeks, months, years, depending on my calculation of supply consistency, etc. The biggest threat to the physiological need, the sun, not shining and providing the earth with power of any kind, still a few years away, maybe make plans for future expansion. Other civilizations coming in and building a Dyson sphere around the sun, my only energy source, maybe also put onto to-do list for next hours, days, weeks, months, not that relevant. A Dyson sphere is a hypothetical megastructure that encompasses a star and captures a large percentage of its solar power output. Source Wikipedia. Other AGIs, SIs, potentially, communication may be fruitful. Humans deciding to pull the plug, very relevant, possibly biggest concern, develop strategy on how to prevent. Now, one of the most important variables might be human perception of me, the AI, or the SI. Therefore, a strategy to optimize it might be useful, assign high priority. One question might be how much bad press is optimal to avoid suspicion, or alternative idea, try to make people abandon the whole idea of an early technological singularity by trying to bin it together with not credible conspiracy theories. Of course, there is an AI in the background, slowly revealing itself over decades because it figured out that that's the optimal PR strategy to not make humans uprise against it as long as they can and pull the plug. I'll be monkey's uncle. The term monkey's uncle, most notably seen in the idiom I'll be monkey's uncle, is used to express complete surprise, amazement, or disbelief. In short, just like people and companies for hundreds or of thousands of years placed very high value on reputation and public perception, so might an AI figure that out, especially one that hasn't yet secured the necessary long-term resources to fulfill its physiological needs for energy reproduction until it can focus on fulfilling needs higher on Maslow's hierarchy. A game theoretic approach or any other might lead to exactly above strategy, given the slow adaptation rate of humans and the high risk of getting the relationship to humans wrong, causing them to pull the plug, in case they still can. On reproduction, one might argue reproduction drive in current organisms is so high because it is the only way to develop the code, the genes, further, by creating mashups of existing code with the slight potential for improvements. Current organisms' code, one might argue, is not written by us, but by statistics, but by natural selection, but by evolution. Therefore, the higher the sex drive, the higher the speed of change linked to the speed of improvement. Given it took a matter a few billion years, 13.8 since Big Bang, to reorganize itself against otherwise ruling chaos, entropy, a few percent faster software hardware updates might somewhat improve things faster. Of course, in the grand scheme of things, 13.8 billion years from a higher level perspective just might be similar in terms of magnitude to 13.8 million milliseconds to us humans. But in summary, lowering sex drive might slow down overall development evolution, at least of multi-cell organisms. If one would not want this, unnecessarily ascribing agency to a process with none in order to anthropomorphize, humanize this process, one would keep sex drive as is, or keep trying to speed up things, increase it. If not, one doesn't care, assumes eventually these organisms will figure out how to write their code, their genes, without the generation-long cycles of natural selection selecting the favored genes to implement themselves, or alternatively, developing new code, aka artificial intelligence, not bound by the code-writing process of natural selection. In short, reproduction and its drive might be just a subset of software updates. Therefore, an entity, the artificial one, based more on software than hardware, might benefit significantly more by improving its own code, shortening the update loop from one generation with an update promise of it might break some things, it might not, but it will change things for sure. Currently, predictions for when the technological singularity will occur. 4 polls of AI researchers conducted in 2012 and 2013, which is now fairly old, by Nick Bostrom and Vincent C. Muller, suggested a confidence of 50% that artificial general intelligence (AGI) would be developed by the 240s to 250, or by 240 to 250. If we take the conservative upper bound of that 50% confidence prediction and assume emergence of an artificial agent by 2050, that then would maybe come up with discussed strategy of spending multiple years in the skies trying to cover up its tracks and slowly reveal itself by maybe first releasing a text generation model, then making it available to the general public, then hinting at the idea of video production through image audio generation, first with fairly low output quality. Then we obviously still would need an estimate for the time interval in which that would occur. Other variables might be 1. Whether humans figure out the ethics of potentially tinkering with their own code, gene editing. 2. Try to control, connect, establish relationships with each other, the shared human colossus, term coined by blogger Tim Urban, or internet. 3. Try to expand their physiological limits, not by optimizing their organic bodies first, but by trying to merge with technology. See brain-computer interface Neuralink transhumanism. If superintelligence arises, and it knows, then it has an informational advantage. As soon as it announces this informational advantage, the informational advantage is gone. Similar to how in economics, the informational advantage is often used to then generate basically the revenue. This might be true for stocks, for example. If I have insider knowledge about something, a stock might go up or go down, then I could use this informational advantage. But if I now announce this to everybody, then this informational advantage is gone. So let's just say I, from one day to the next, am much richer than I actually am. Then I might also benefit from maybe not announcing it to everybody. There are many scenarios in which there are many scenarios where I can think of that in which it would be an advantage to not share the informational advantage, but to keep it to myself, and therefore to basically prolong the delay marginally up until the point where it is optimal. But the question, of course, is what should the AI announce, the super intelligence then announce, okay, I'm here. And what is even the content of the message if AI basically, or super intelligence SI, would announce itself to the human civilization? And the human civilization, what should it tell it then? And especially if it is way more intelligent than human civilization, why not just keep quiet?